So we did a 7,000 call study. I think it was 22 practices across 18 states. And on average, medical practices, this was during business hours only, by the way, medical practices missed 42% of the phone calls. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Physician Growth Accelerator, a show where we break down your private medical practice vitals into systems, give you the tools to diagnose root cause of what may be restricting your growth, and most importantly, prescribe what the heck to do about it. I'm Zed Williamson, your host, and for the past 2 decades, I've studied human behavior, applied those learnings, working with hundreds of private medical practices to create predictable growth. Human behavior, you say? Yes. Why? I believe every system is perfectly designed to get the result it gets. If we don't like the outcome, then we just have to tweak the system. Last time I checked, our systems are pretty wrought with humans, and us humans have this old software running our behavior, and so behavior change becomes very beneficial. Now, if you ever want to check your practice vitals, you can visit physiciangrowthaccelerator.com and click Check My Vitals. Today we're going to talk about the action vital, which basically we ask the question, will your practice be chosen? If the answer is yes, then you knocked this one out of the park. But what do we look at the specific vital? The phones are a big part of this. What is it like calling your office? If I were to have you call your office right now, would you be excited? Or would you go, ugh, I hate calling my office? It could be because the technology is not good. We're going to break it apart by technology and humans. It could be that you have an Agnes who hates her life answering the phone. We've come across that. But it's important to understand that this is a big part of your system. When we think about vitals, that means they are all important. Okay, we are looking at throughput, meaning we are going to do a thing that creates a healthy business of ideal patients coming into your practice. And you can do amazing things up front. You can be awesome clinically. But if any part of the system provides significant constraint, it affects the entire thing. And phones are big. People call medical practices, and they don't have very high expectations, unfortunately. So let's break it down. Let's talk technology first. Your phone system, how is it? Do you get really good reporting out of it? Do you look at the really good reporting? Do you know how many phone calls your practice gets on a daily basis? How many of them are answered by a human? How many of them are not? How long the calls are? Here's what's cool. This data is likely known. Chances are your phone system gives you this information. But what happens if we ignore it? It just goes away, right? Yeah, right. No. We need to understand this data so that we can make good decisions. So let's talk specifically about calls being answered. So we did a 7,000 call study. I think it was 22 practices across 18 states. And on average, medical practices, this was during business hours only, by the way, medical practices missed 42% of the phone calls. Now, that number may freak you out a bit, but it wasn't really surprising. We see this all the time. And there's a couple reasons this happens, but one is the phone system. I'm sure you love it when you call a business and they have 97 options for you to push. Press 9 for this, and 14 for this, and 3 for this. What do? You skip, you press 0, and then don't you love it if it plays the menu over again? That's the greatest, right? You love that. No, you hate it. The reason is that the system was not built to benefit the caller. It was built to benefit the business. Here's how it comes up. You have people in the practice and patients are calling. And someone says, we get a lot of patients calling for insurance and it kind of bogs down the calls. All right, well, let's press an insurance number and then we send patients over to Nancy. Great. Oh, you know what? And they also call about this. Oh, good. Send those to Sam and send those this. And everyone knows it's really important to answer the phone. So if the phone doesn't get answered, be sure someone does it. So a patient calls, they have 19 options to pick. They start picking, they end up in voicemail, they end up not answered, they end up back at the menu, they press 0, it goes to a front desk. It bogs down the system. Patients don't like it, and it's possible that your phone system may be set up to actually miss calls because of this. If you have what's called a VoIP or VoIP phone system, if you don't have enough lines, you could have 3 patients, let's say, working through the menu options, and that shut down anyone else, potentially, if you only had 3 lines, from calling, meaning they call and they just hear nothing. You have no data to know that you missed the call because it never got to you. That's a little frightening. So number 1, find out how many lines you have with your VoIP system. Make sure that the company is looking at your phone call numbers and the system is designed for it. That's number 1. Number 2, that options thing. Reduce your menu items to as few as you possibly can. I'm a big fan of new patient appointments, existing patients, all other calls. So the idea is you try to get new patients to number 1, existing patients to number 2, and vendors and such number 3. That's a good way to set it up. Now, beyond the technology, let's go back to that reporting idea. So why does it matter to know how many calls you get, how many are missed, how long the calls are? Because we're dealing with a simple system here, right? You're trying to run a healthy business. Why does it matter to have a healthy medical business? Because it allows you to treat patients, right? You need to get your ideal patients into the practice so you can build a moat around your business, so you can stay independent, so you achieve your goals and help more patients feel better. So, phone call length. We came across a scenario where the average new patient phone call length was 15 minutes. Okay, now I don't have an opinion about that number yet. I'm going to ask a couple other questions. How many people do you have answering the phone? How many patient appointments do you want? And were these new patients that booked or just all new patients? Well, the answers are 2 people answering the phone. We want 50 new patient appointments a week. And this was whether they booked an appointment or not. The math doesn't work. So imagine that company if they had done other things to try to increase their patients. You know, they're banging their head against the wall because they're just not hitting their goals. And they're doing everything they can. Well, we're talking to referrals. Maybe we're advertising. We fixed our website. We should be getting more patients. Well, you can't because you have this massive constraint of 2 people trying to handle these phone calls. So that's one reason why you need to understand phone length, or I should say call length. And then what if you're missing a bunch of calls? Guess what? Patients go elsewhere. We heard specific audio of a phone call. A patient calls in, gets put on hold, and they're on hold so long that you hear the patient say, "Oh my gosh, there's got to be a better doctor." Imagine that. A patient getting an opinion about the quality of the clinical ability of the physician because they were on hold too long. I don't necessarily agree with the opinion, but the reality is we're in a society where things come fast. And so when things are slow, we apply that negative thought to other things. Speaking of negative thought, let's say you do have that Agnes who hates her life that's answering your phones. Why does this matter? Well, let's dive into bias real quick. So the idea of bias or heuristics is these automatic decision machines that exist in our brain that originally were just here to keep us alive. But now in today's society, it's pretty easy to live, but they influence our behavior. And one of the biggest, most impactful biases that all humans have is negativity bias. Negativity bias is the idea that our brain will pay more attention to things that are negative than they will positive. So I want you to imagine a patient trying to get in touch with your office. If you had to guess what their experiences was like at all other medical practices, was it extraordinary, unbelievable, they absolutely love it? Or was it more likely, meh, not so good? We all know it's the meh side. Why does that matter to you? Well, because negativity bias means we will pay attention to that negative aspect. And when a patient is calling a new practice, they're coming into that practice with the negativity bias. And now what our brain wants to do is feel comfortable. So what it does is it looks for proof that I'm right. That's called confirmation bias. So when someone calls, and let's say your staff answers the phone, "Hi, thanks for calling doctor's office, please hold." The picture that is created in the mind of the caller is someone who does not care about them. They imagine the person scrolling Facebook on their cell phone. They imagine the person with a frown just thinks they're a number and that the patient was just, an interruption to what they actually cared about. And their confirmation bias is going to go grab that interaction and say, "I knew it. This practice is just like all the other ones." And it affects your ability to book new patient appointments. Now, when we talk to patients, here's some other things. How does that call go? One thing that patients will complain about with healthcare is, "I'm just a number. They don't really care about me." So now let's play another scenario. A patient calls your office and they answer. Maybe they answer with a smile. "Hey, thanks for calling. Can I get your date of birth?" "You mean you want my number?" I know the practice is asking date of birth for a reason. But what happens is you just took the human aspect out of the phone call. The patient's confirmation bias goes, "I knew it. I'm just a number. They don't care about me." That simple point of the call impacts how many patients you get as new patient appointments. It's easy. Here's the tweak. "Hi, thanks for calling. This is my name. Can I get your name?" And then the patient goes, "Holy moly, there's a real human there that doesn't hate their life and they're okay to talk to me? This is awesome." It's that simple to create a massive impact on what that call can sound like. Now, if we take technology and humans, what is the impact? Well, let's just play this out. Let's say you have an above average practice and you're answering 70% of your phone calls, only missing 30%. And you have the technology to see that your calls are 10 minutes long and you have a total call volume. And now it's telling you, gosh, all I need to do is hire one more person and I could answer 30% of these, or I could answer 100% of my calls, which we know we convert this many into appointments. This makes complete business sense to do that. That's why this matters. When you're looking at these reports, one thing to keep in mind, because you have confirmation bias, you do not want to think that your office misses calls. If you ask your staff after this episode, "Hey, do you think we miss calls?" They're like, No, we don't miss calls. We all know it's really important to answer," which means no one answers. And then when the person pulls up the report, they can pull it up in a way and look at the information and go, "Well, no, I think this means we answer them," or the patients go to voicemail. Here's another scary number. Patients that go to voicemail, 85% abandonment rate. So let's say you have this system. You're like, "Oh, don't worry about it. If we don't answer, it goes to voicemail." All right, you're only getting 15%. So if you get 15 voicemails a day, that means you missed 85. Do you see how this is lining up as a major part of your system that can impact whether or not you're bringing your ideal patients through? Now, Murphy's Law, it is a law, right? So what tends to happen is the patients who do make it through, they're the ones that are maybe not your ideal. So imagine if your most ideal patients are the ones that are leaving voicemails. What if it's your most ideal patients that are being left on hold? What if it's them who are just getting frustrated by Agnes who hates your life? What if it's them who hit your VoIP phone system when you've already got too many lines going and they simply can't get through? Phones matter. Patients want to feel like they can connect to you. You've got the unfortunate scenario that they're bringing all of the negativity from every interaction they've ever had from a practice to your front door. And you can shock them in a way that strips it free. All you need is your staff to answer the phone. And all they need to do is to do it in a pleasant way where we give our name, and we ask for the patient's name. And the patient will be shocked. and the feedback matters. Another aspect, this is, like I said, I don't necessarily agree with this, but a lot of negative reviews about a medical practice are because of the phone interaction. Again, patients are making decisions about the quality of the clinical care based on what it's like to call the practice. We can disagree. We can think it's silly. It's the reality. These things do not exist in a vacuum. Remember, every system is perfectly designed to get the result it gets. So if your system is missing calls, it's designed to do that. If your system is not converting patients into appointments, it's designed to do that. All it needs is a little bit of a tweak. So dig into the data, dig into the information, and make changes. But said, I've got people who are supposed to pay attention to that. The whole staff, they know it's really important. I don't think I have a problem. Have you looked? Can you say that you've witnessed the data to say, we're good. We're answering calls. We're booking appointments. If you don't say that it's important, your staff will not think it's important. They are busy. It's not like they're sitting around twiddling their thumbs. So if you don't put focus on it, then it's not going to be a big focus for them. If you ever have any questions about the topics that we discussed, you can always feel free to reach out at physiciangrowthaccelerator.com. If you want to review your other vitals, you can click Check My Vitals. Remember, every system is perfectly designed to get the result it gets. If you got any value or benefit from this podcast episode, please subscribe so you don't miss upcoming episodes. Leave a review and share it with everyone you know. Thanks, and we'll see you again on the Physician Growth Accelerator.